Welcome back to News in Focus. Now, the assassination of a witness at the end of the second phase of the Madlanga Commission's inquiry during those implicated in corruption in the criminal justice system responded to the allegations against them has cast doubt on the state's ability to protect those who come forward to hold powerful people accountable. The co-chairs of the Nat Joints met officials from the Madlanga Commission over the killing of witness D, known as Marius van der Merwe, who was shot dead at his home in Brakpan over the weekend. This is not the first time it's happened. We need to look at Babita Deokaran in 2021, and we'll actually get a closer understanding when it comes to the protection of whistleblowers. Joining me now to take this discussion forward, I'd like to welcome Genevieve Quintal, who is from Amnesty International South Africa. Genevieve, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Faraz. Thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Genevieve, I guess we're having this discussion with heavy hearts as South Africans, and rightfully so, because here we are, an important witness gunned down right in front of his family.
Absolutely, Faraz, and I think you said it. This isn't the first time that we're dealing with this, unfortunately. And, you know, it's something we've been speaking about for a while now, is whistleblower protection, but also further protection for what we call human rights defenders, of which whistleblowers are part of this cohort. And the fact that we don't have, firstly, there isn't adequate whistleblower protection, but we also need specific human rights defender protection mechanisms, legislation to protect people who stand up for rights, to protect people who blow the whistle on corruption, to protect those who come forward with any type of information, because we've seen it's been quite easy to get rid of these people and nothing really happens after that. You spoke about Babita, the fact we don't know who was the mastermind behind that. And, you know, the potential of these types of things happening, and what's the scary thing now is that this could deter future witnesses from coming forward. And that does a lot. That for us is an attack, not just on the individual, obviously, and condolences to Marius van der Merwe's family, but it's an attack on justice and accountability in this country we so badly need.
Now, you mentioned attack on justice, and of course, that's the word coming out from civil society. Here's my thing, Genevieve. So there was an interview with, Bongani Bingwa on his breakfast show, and what he had said, or what he had asked the Minister of Justice, Mamloko Kubai, is where is the protection for whistleblowers? And it's sort of a knee-jerk reaction we get from government. While we're busy establishing a piece of legislature which will allow for the protection of whistleblowers, the problem is it takes time. Meanwhile, witnesses, like you mentioned, cannot come forward and give testimony. And number two, any witnesses who is going to be brave enough to go and give those testimonies are going to be potentially in harm's way. And here we are waiting for legislation to go ahead and be enforced.
I think what we need to remember for us, and what the minister needs to remember, is that as far as back as 2023, after the Zondo Commission, there was a discussion paper put out by the Department of Justice calling for submissions on how to strengthen whistleblower protection. We have legislation that protects whistleblowers in different spheres. It's not one piece of legislation. It's bits of legislation in different. So there's within the Labour Act, we've got the protection of information. We've got a number of different, in the Companies Act, etc., a number of legislation that's supposed to be there to protect whistleblowers. But that legislation needs to be enhanced. It needs to be strengthened, and that's what came out of the Zondo Commission. So it's now how many years? 3 years, and you're telling me they still haven't been able to strengthen. They're not starting from scratch. They need to strengthen that legislation. Then on the other side, we're adding on as Amnesty International South Africa, what I spoke about, the human rights defender legislation or protection mechanism. That would be a wholly complete new source of or new legislation. But it cannot take us 3 years to strengthen a legislation that we already have, and that's the whistleblower legislation. And also, you know, the minister's spoken a lot about witness protection, and I know there's been a lot of reports that Marius van der Merwe had declined witness protection, but that's not the only form of protection. You know, witness protection is very specific, and it takes you away from your family, it takes you away from your work. You know, not everyone wants to go into witness protection, and you have a right to say no to witness protection. It doesn't mean that you couldn't be protected in other ways. But really, we cannot be like, oh, well, we offered witness protection, that was it, and he didn't want it, and so be it. But for us, I just also want to say, I mean, there needs to be a thorough investigation.
Yeah.
We don't know yet if Marius van der Merwe was murdered because of his testimony at the Madlanga Commission. We've seen other reports of work he's done in the mining sector. So this calls for a proper, thorough, timely investigation that happens as quick as possible so that we can ascertain where the problem is. It because of the Madlanga Commission? But that also doesn't mean that the Madlanga Commission mustn't look at the protection it's offering to witnesses.
Genevieve, if you listen to, of course, other reports, it mentions that Marius had said, my life is in danger. I mean, I'd like to think that on that in itself, some sort of proactiveness needed to happen, but it did not happen. It's a very similar one to Babita Deokaran, who wrote to, of course, the leadership structures of Tembisa Hospital, informing them of companies that had been flagged when it came to that very same hospital. Nothing was done. And therein lies the challenge and the concern that if you are a whistleblower, if you are a witness, really those who you lean on to assist you aren't really going to help because of the deep rot and corruption that exists within our society, especially in key important structures of our country.
Absolutely. I mean, just the fact that people, and you know, I don't know what the circumstances on who he reported it to.
Yeah, sure.
You know, was it reported to the police? Were the police told that he felt unsafe? Was it reported to the commission? You know, so who's taking accountability for those things? And I think that needs to form part of the investigation as well. When he said he'd been threatened how? All that evidence needs to be collected. And you're right. When people come forward and say, I'm being threatened, I need help, those who are in either the leadership structures or in the position to help need to take those threats seriously, because we cannot have a situation where, and I say this because we keep seeing it happen, and we saw it happen with the lawyer from a few months ago, and I apologize, his name escaped, Bauer.
Yes.
He had also received death threats. And look what happened. Babita had received death threats. Look what happened. So we need to look at that. We really need to look at the protection of whistleblowers, the protection of human rights defenders. We need to find the gaps, and we need to fix them. And we need to fix them quick, because we're finding that if someone wants you gone in this country, it's very easy.
Genevieve, one final question. Of course, you've mentioned Amnesty International would like government to look at a piece of legislation for the protection of witnesses and whistleblowers. I think both you and I can agree it's going to take, it's probably a long-term solution to all of this. What's the short-term solution? Because sooner or later, the Madlanga Commission needs to give an interim report to President Cyril Ramaphosa. No one knows what's going to happen between now and then, especially for the protection of witnesses. So what is Amnesty International South Africa calling on to try and make sure that witnesses, whistleblowers, and those who are brave enough to stand up to the corrupt and these syndicates in our country, so that this criminal justice system can get going and working again?
I think from a witness and a whistleblower protection side, like I said, we have legislation. It needs to be implemented. And I think the Madlanga Commission needs to really look at its procedures. And it needs to be also on a case-for-case basis, right? Everyone has different needs. Everyone has different protection needs. And like I said, just offering witness protection is not enough.
Sure.
And again, not everyone wants to leave their homes. I think a lot of introspection needs to be done. I think they need to look at their processes, and I think they need to do a risk analysis, and they need to use the current legislation we have. But also, the Department of Justice needs to move fast on implementing the changes to the current whistleblower legislation. And us as Amnesty International South Africa are going to continue to push for legislation for all human rights defenders, to make sure that anyone who speaks up, anyone who's standing up for anyone's rights, you, me, any community, that people are protected, that they don't find themselves losing their lives because they're standing up for people's human rights.
Genevieve Quintal, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Faraz.
That's Genevieve Quintal from Amnesty International South Africa. After the break, we'll wrap up the conversation on slightly a lighter note. A 17-year-old Amina Chunara from Lenasia, she's one of the top 5 winners that will be going to Antarctica to obviously go ahead and reflect on the importance of climate change. She'll be speaking to me after the break. Do stay tuned.